All right. Great. So I want to thank you all for coming today. I'm Dyanna. I'm the talent scout at Creative Niche, and we've got an awesome panel today, a day in the life of a developer boss. We, of course, want to hear what you have to say, so I'm going to leave about 10 minutes at the end for question and answer. Just a heads up, we don't have a mic, so if you could speak up really loud if you have a question so that we can all hear you, that would be great. Let's dive right into it. First, I'm going to introduce our panel again, give everyone 30 seconds to sort of chat a little bit about themselves, and then we will dive right in. So we'll start with Harris.
Cool. Hello. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Harris, front-end developer at Shopify. I teach at Ladies Learning Code and HackerU as well in the evenings. Freelance when I can, build a bunch of crazy side project stuff, play soccer, love and a lot. Game of Thrones is A+. Please come argue with me. We can go on for days.
Great. And Robin.
The nerdiest thing I've ever done is work on reactors in the Hainan region in China. Generally, you can find me in Revelstoke, British Columbia, snowboarding in my off time each winter, or flying around San Francisco, Toronto, and back to Alberta.
Did you know that your memoir one day is going to be From Reactors to React?
No, but I'm sure it'll come out soon.
Amazing.
That's great.
Actually, there's a guy at Creative Niche that told me that it was like nuclear engineer and a front-end developer, and it's like, that's badass, man. He came up with the tagline, it wasn't me.
That's awesome.
Cool. My name is Wes Boss, and I'm a full-stack developer. I spend most of my time creating video courses, which you can learn JavaScript and CSS and stuff like that. They're pretty good, right? And I also teach at HackerU in the evenings, which is just a coding school here in Toronto. And I tweet a lot. That's pretty much my entire life.
Awesome.
And I barbecue too.
Yeah,
right,
the green egg. We should probably add to that. All of us are related to HackerU, so shout out to the alum that are here. Yeah. Woo! I'm taking another course. I am a product of the full-time front-end development bootcamp. So
my full-time front-end development bootcamp.
Wes taught me all the goodness.
That's awesome. Okay, great. So I'm just going to dive into it with a question. So what do you think is the biggest misconception about developers?
I got this. Quite often, a lot of people assume that developers are born good developers. Like people assume that developers are born as great developers, and that's 100% not the case. A lot of the stuff is learned over time, based on your surroundings, based on the things that you interact with, based on your own mindset, and you just learn things over time. And a lot of people also assume that, like, you know, those other people are geniuses, and I will never get to that level as well. Like, so much of us, there's so much stuff that we don't know, and that's every single person in this room and in our entire industry. And that's the norm, and that's kind of weird because it's the only industry where that's like. Like if you were a surgeon and you didn't know what you were surgerying, that would be terrifying.
Absolutely.
But it's okay if I need to Google stuff. Like that's part of my job, and that's totally cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll just say the same thing that whatever it is that you'd like to do, as long as you put in the time. Like, I was terrible at math. Everyone thinks you need to be really mathy because, like, the first thing that you encounter when you learn JavaScript is like lots of like adding and stuff. And you don't have to be good at math. You just have to have that sort of like creative hunger to be able to work at stuff, and then just put in the time, put in the raw amount of time, and that's really where it's going to pay off for you.
None of you can imagine, I nearly failed all of my CS courses in university. And now I love code. I hated programming when I was in university. It was unbelievably hard, and it's like moving into the web is a completely different world. To add to that question, people assume your general profile is some dude in the basement with a massive beard. Like, I can't be a developer.
It's Harris,
I don't look like a developer. Yeah, this guy is sitting next to us. But that's like, I can't tell you how surprised people are when I tell them that I am a developer.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. So I just wanted to sort of, see that perspective from your eyes, and then I wanted to lead into sort of, so we have potentially had these misconceptions. Now they're squashed. So let's look at your day-to-day. So what does your day look like? I know, Horace, you're in an office. Robin and Wes, you're both freelance. Do you have any daily rituals that you abide by, that you feel contributes to your productivity? Do you like to take a break for physical activity, read, anything like that?
Yeah, one of the things that I enjoyed doing during my commute, or even when I first get into work while having breakfast, is sort of just see what's happening in the world. Our industry grows so fast. It's really important to see what's happening. Not necessarily understand every aspect of it, but check out a couple blogs, read a few articles, and just see what's happening in the world. Even if it's just scrolling through your Twitter feed, following specific developers like these fine folks, and just seeing what's happening. Great. And also taking some time to go for a walk and do something that doesn't require you to sit in front of a screen all day. Absolutely. It's super healthy and important.
Great.
I generally have a week by week ritual or routine, because I have no tech days. That is literally no tech. I leave my phone at home. I don't turn on my computer. I don't watch TV. I go outside every single week on Saturdays, and I cook all day, or I go grocery shopping. That's one of the things that's really important for me. I code from 6 in the morning until noon. That is my optimal time. I don't answer emails. I will not open my email until after lunch, because otherwise it totally takes up my day. And if I decide to open up my email when I'm lying in bed or whatever, then I'm really reactive for the rest of the day instead of focused on what it is that I need to accomplish. That's probably the biggest thing that makes me really productive during my days, and then I'll go work out afterwards.
Awesome.
Yeah, my secret, and it just probably won't work for everyone because they have meetings and stuff, is I make sure that I have as little as possible on my calendar for the given week. So whether it's meetings or coffees or whatever it is that people are trying to steal time away from me, I make sure that there's just nothing on my calendar. Sometimes I can send you a screenshot of my calendar and I have nothing on it. There's nothing in it. And what that allows me to do is just hunker down and actually work on the stuff that I want to work on, and really get some good blocks of time off on the stuff that I'm working. And then usually once a week or once every 2 weeks, I have what's called bits and bobs days, where it's just all the shit you don't want to do ever.
Admin.
Just admin. You got to or just fixing little things, these emails that have been kicking around and things like that. And I'll just sort of blow through all of that in one day, which allows me to just open up these really full open days for me to dive deep. Because as a developer, it sucks when you get interrupted. It sucks when you've got 11 different CSS things on 14 different websites that you need to fix. And it's frustrating context switching from one to another.
Context switching is probably the biggest thing that removes a lot of my time during the day. I like having a phone call or meetings and stuff. Any of my meetings are always scheduled in the afternoon, because coding is always done in the morning. Every single day, you hunker down. It's it's part of the trigger that happens, and you just dive really quickly into it. And because it becomes a habit eventually, it makes it a lot easier to dive right in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people say oh, that's nice that you don't have to do your email, but I've got clients and stuff like that. And for me, it was a lot of just training clients and people that I'm working with that, for me at least, my mornings are most productive in coding. And it's just training them that it's not IM on email, and I'm not gonna do it first thing in the morning and then have that back and forth. I'll do my email probably once or twice a day, and definitely not before about 11:30.
That's great. So that was actually my next natural question, which was, how do you structure your day? So you seem to be more morning people. Harris, you have maybe more of a structured environment.
Yeah, so obviously I don't have that level of flexibility when you're working at a company. You don't get to control when you have meetings and when you don't. But because everything is driven around a calendar of sorts, so book those meetings, I just book off meetings where only I'm attending, and people can't book me for those time slots. So quite often I'll just book 4-hour meetings, and just no one knows okay, I guess we'll have to book for the next day. And that's totally cool. A lot of people at the company do that. Cool. So these are my work hours, and people can see that it's only me in this meeting, and that's totally fine. It's just like they both just said, I need that chunk of time to focus and hunker down, and the afternoons are mostly used for all the additional meetings that I need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you book a breakaway space to do that?
Sometimes, depending on, we have a very open concept in our at Shopify's office. So everything's very much like out in the open. Quite often, I'll just have my headphones on and I sort of just block out everything else. Don't know
Noise
what's happening
canceling,
around me.
the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or just really loud music.
Tell me when you're 80 years old and can't hear anybody.
I will.
Perfect.
Yeah, or like sometimes I'll just like actually hop into like a little nook or like a solo meeting room and just like do my own thing there.
Wonderful. Yep, go ahead.
I was gonna say so I'm kind of a weird developer when it comes to coding at 6 in the morning. I don't know any other developers that like doing that, but the majority of my team on this current project for the last few months, they're in San Francisco, so I have 3 hours on them, which makes my day is almost complete by the time I start having all of those meetings. And I hate having meetings; they're soul sucking generally. So I like doing my favorite work in the morning.
That's great. So we all have a lot of tasks, information being thrown at us. Is there any sort of system that you use to keep track of those emails, to keep track of your calendar? Do you use productivity apps?
Yeah. So I follow pretty closely something called GTD, which is getting things done. It's just like really old guy that came up with it like 20 years ago for like big companies like GE and stuff like that. And it sort of trickled down into like the entrepreneur tech space where sort of there's a whole bunch of stuff behind it. But like the 2 rules that I follow is get out of your head and into some sort of system. So if you are thinking right now like, oh, I need to make sure that I email someone, or I need to make sure that I update that latest release of something, get it out of your head and put it into, I use a to-do app called Things because it lets me like structure my to-dos by like time of day, but also areas that I need to do them. And then the other rule behind that is if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. And that's surprising how much stuff just takes 2 minutes. Like sometimes you open up an email and someone asks you a question and you just go, yeah, whatever, I'll do it later. Next. And all of a sudden you got like 1,000 of those emails that you need to reply. So if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. If it doesn't, don't use your email inbox as like a to-do list, because that's a to-do list that other people can add shit to, and you don't want that. So I have Things as a to-do app, and then I'll just put stuff into it, and then I'll just be constantly bubbling the items up and down as I see they're important, and I'll just knock off as many from the top down as I can for that day.
Yeah, it's really funny. Shopify actually took that get things done idea and turned it to get shit done because we're a badass like that.
So relevant to young people.
Of course. So our whole company sort of built
'Cause you're
on that
so
same
old.
mindset of like GSD. That's what we do. We have a GSD officer. Like it's crazy. And it's that same concept. Like do things, if they're quick, do them right now. I use a task manager as well. I think I use Todoist. And just like create really high level tasks of things that I need to do in those different buckets and get to them when I have specific time allotted to them. Because I have like a bajillion things happening in my life, it's really difficult to keep track of all those things in your head or in your email. Don't do that. Just use a notebook if you want to write things down, or an app or anything. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're keeping track of it somewhere. It's super, super helpful if you do.
Yeah, especially if you're like trying to fall asleep and you're starting to remember things. Out of your head, into your system, your mind will be clear.
Absolutely.
I'm still fine-tuning that
Yeah?
that to-do process. I use a combination of like the 18-month Moleskine planner with the days on the left and like notes on the right, and Evernote is like really big for that. I love the Chrome plugin or Chrome extension Boomerang, because when I need to remember to send some guy an email in a month's time, I don't want to have to remember to do that. So if I need to know that I got to send this guy a reminder or something in a month's time, I just write the email, I hit Boomerang, and it sends it in a month's time for me. And I don't have to remember any of that.
great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I will say I fall victim to the keeping my inbox as a to-do list. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, one more thought on that as well is your to-do list items shouldn't be learn React or update site. They should be like you're writing tests for your software. They should be like clear things that there is a clear success objective to each of those tasks. So while you can have like a high level task, make sure that you break those things down into little things, and you get little wins. You check it off, you feel good about yourself, and you get motivation to do the rest.
I have a wall of like sticky notes of all those big things that I like to do, because that's part of breaking it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like that instant gratification that you get when you check something off, like anyone who uses a to-do app is guilty of this, where you create a new line item and immediately click done, just because you want to feel like, yeah, I did. I do it all the time.
endorphins.
It feels so good. So when you have those small, tinier like chunks of work that are more digestible, it's so awesome. Keeps you pumped up.
That's great. So we had sort of touched on this. We had a little meeting before, and I spoke to Robin about this specific question that she'd asked. So I want to pose it to everyone. How frequently do you need to make decisions between balancing quality and shipping, for instance, shipped over perfect? And what techniques or rules do you use to help with those decisions ultimately?
I can answer. My stuff is very rarely polished, and you can see that if you go to any of my tweets where I like launch something. The first reply is "Congrats, but this is fucked up," right? Like something's weird on my like Nexus phone or something like that, and immediately I'm like, "Oh, thanks." Like it's such a like I launched. Oh, it's really screwed up, but that kind of stuff, like you fix it really quickly. You get it worked out really quickly. So I'm much more of a just get it launched. Obviously, I have some high standard for quality, but I'm not going to sit there polishing it forever because it'll never get launched.
Yeah, one of the phrases that I heard in the past, I forget who said this, but it says that if you are 100% happy with something that you've launched, you launch too late. Because especially if it's like an MVP of something, you're trying something out. If it's absolutely perfect, you could have launched weeks ago and to see whether or not it actually works. Yeah.
It's all about getting that user feedback too, right?
Absolutely.
You want to know, okay, well, you can test for all the extreme cases or like the extremity designs, like the number of characters is not quite fitting with this design, right? Like that's a really common thing that we run into when you're managing multiple locales, like Japanese or Chinese or something. The character count doesn't fit. So, I mean, shipping really fast and getting that user feedback is really, really important. And that's how you do it, is by shipping it quickly.
On the other hand, when you're working in the agency life, especially, or in freelancing, like the three main things that sort of play into a project is the amount of, like the scope of work that needs to be done, the amount of time that you have to do it, and the quality.
Yep. Pick two.
And one of the things that I've noticed, like quite often, quality gets like sort of like left out, and too much time is spent on like making sure that the functionality, like all the functionality is there, we covered the full scope, and we like work till 3 o'clock in the morning to get this project out. So you have to find like a really good balance, and quite often like, pick two and make sure that quality is one of them. Like you should always be able, like time is never as intense as your client says it is. Like they can always be a little bit flexible, and same with scope. You can always do like a 0.1 or 0.2 release after the main initial release.
And it's not like if those UI elements on the page are a few pixels off, somebody's gonna die. We live in an intangible world, right?
That's very true. All right, I'm going to take it in a totally different direction. I'd love to sort of learn what you think the biggest growth challenges for leaders in the tech industry looks like, and what do you feel are qualities of a successful tech leader?
I think being naturally curious is really important, and like have a really deep love for learning, because if you don't, you're going to get left behind. Like the biggest struggle that I find on a day-to-day basis or a month-by-month basis in the tech world is there's so much shit coming at you every single day. How do you manage that? How do you choose what framework am I going to learn this month? What language am I going to learn this year? Like those kind of decisions, that's really hard to make.
I think also what's important is just being able to look at everything that's moving so quickly right now, all these new frameworks that come out every 3 days and all that stuff, and just being able to be like, you know what, I'm going to let somebody else like get burned on that, and I'm going to wait until it's like super stable and that everybody's using it and it's sort of commonplace, because if you just try to chase the shiny penny around all day long, you're not going to get any real work done. So I don't know. That's one thing, is everybody here probably feels exhausted with how quick everything is moving right now. And the answer to that is not to try everything. It's to really just sit back and wait and watch and just see until things like when React came out like 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't jump on it immediately. I sat and waited for it to sort of become popular, and now that React is clearly one of the big ones in the industry, then it's time to start adopting it and using it in your work, because most of us just have to get work done at the end of the day. We can't just play around with everything.
Seth Godin talks a lot about the early adopters and that kind of wave effect that you'll see, or the distribution curve. So a lot of the early adopters that'll come in, like that's where there's still like a lot of finicky stuff. Obviously, most of you know when you're managing frameworks, but once it starts to get like more traction with with more individuals, that's generally when I'll pick something up, because I don't have time to try and learn the shiny penny every couple of months.
Just wait until Wes releases a course and you know it's legit.
That's
seriously though, like I
that
get
is
people
that's how I
ask me for
manage it.
courses all the time, and I'm not going to release a course on something that is very new or very shiny, because it's not established. It's probably going to change a lot. But when I see something as commonplace, like ES6 or React or something like that, I make a course on it, because it's stable enough, and I know that there's enough people using it that it's going to both sell and people are going to use it.
Paul Irish was tweeting yesterday at Vue.js. Maybe Vue is the next one.
That's, a lot of people are asking about Vue these days.
So that's actually a really interesting point. Is, do you think that business acumen, or like being on top of these trends and sort of leveraging that from a business perspective, is something important for developers?
Yeah. I think it's important for developers and designers. And in order to do your job well, you need to understand why you're building the software, right? Like you can it's a cool new framework and stuff, but if you don't understand at the end of the day how this stuff is making you money, especially as like a freelance developer, you need to know how to make your client more money, because if you're making your client more money, if you understand like the business game, you're going to just print money. Right?
Because like quite often the end user doesn't care if your website's built in React or Angular or Vue. Like they can't even tell. It's more so like we get super stoked by it, but really no one else does. So like to spend so much time and effort focusing on something that like obviously like impacts the end result, but not in a way that like we think it does, is very detrimental. And it's really important to know what the business is behind what it is that you're building. At Shopify, for example, they highly recommend that every single person who works there have their own store, be an entrepreneur, run your own business. That is the best way for us to understand our own product. And when you do that, you're in a perfect position to help solve those problems further.
Absolutely. Great. So Robin, you had sort of touched on this before, feeling that maybe people might know more than you, you're not necessarily the most knowledgeable of your group. How do you sort of overcome that feeling when you have to go into a collaborative space and want to feel participation and involvement in that maybe brainstorming?
So we were talking beforehand, and I always feel like everybody else in the room already knows what I know. That is that anxiety coming out in me of everybody is way smarter than I am. And I mean, Harris can add a little bit to this, but I find that the best way to do that is to be really humble and like open yourself up and say, hey, I don't really know much about this, or I'm looking to learn a little bit more about this. I can bring this to the table. But like being really humble and don't be a jackass and try and play it off like you know everything. People can see right through you. It's like paper thin. And being humble is really important. But I'm gonna let Harris talk about the 50 people rule.
Yeah, what happens quite often is when you're looking at the stuff people know, you very much take it as I know this and they all know so much more than I do. And you forget that like so much more are multiple people. Everyone knows their own little bubble of stuff, and yes, there's a small overlap with every single other person, but they all, know maybe just as much as you do in their own unique way. Their own world of web dev is very different than what mine is.
Absolutely.
So it's very, very important to remember that there's no one who knows like 50 times more than you, because their brain just can't handle that. But there might be 50 people who know very different stuff from you. So when you're in those meetings, like you can relate with the things that you have in common and then take the opportunity to learn what those people know that you may not know yourself, and like help all these individual bubbles continuously grow at these meetings.
Yeah. I share a lot of stuff that I learn. As soon as I learn something and I think that's neat, I'll share it on Twitter. And I think what I've learned as I learn more is the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And then all of a sudden you have 20 years experience and you realize you're just like a tiny little person. There's people going to Mars, and you can barely get your Ajax request to work, right? But I think what's really important from me learning that, and for everyone here to know, is please don't be afraid to share what you've learned, because the amount of times that I've tweeted out just a simple little thing that I've learned, so many people are like, oh, I had no idea. That's amazing. And I think that there's a lot of people in the room that know these little nuggets of information, but they assume people know everything, or they'll assume they'll be called out from others because that's so simple. So if you know something, make sure that you share it. Write it down on a blog post, tweet it out, share it with someone on your team. And B, if you're someone seeing someone share what they know, don't be a dick and be like, yeah, I already knew that, or that's not the best way, because that really cripples our culture of sharing what you know. Be like, that's great. Maybe you should try this one as well, or I love that part of this thing, because clearly there's going to be people that know this already, but there's going to be a vast majority of very quiet people who never knew that as well.
Wes, do you get trolled?
All the time. People are like, oh, I knew that already. But like that, and I have to learn how to push past that, because there's, for every like one guy who knows it already, there's probably 100 other people that really benefit from something like that.
Yeah, and the way, like, one thing I learned, or I've seen as I've been teaching more and more, is that every instructor sort of has their own way of teaching or of explaining something, and like your way might seem or might be more understandable by someone specific. So like the way I teach is very different than the way Wes teaches, but that like might attract or might sit well with specific people. So especially for like the juniors out there in the audience, like, you are fresh and brand new to this industry. So the way, like, you were like at that place where you didn't understand any of this stuff, and you are maybe in an even better position to explain how to explain those things to other people entering that industry.
The mentors I teach a class at HackerU for JavaScript, and our mentors are people who've been doing JavaScript for 2 years. And often I'll just hand it off to them to explain it. Why? Because they remember 2 years ago when they didn't know it, and it's so much easier for them to explain it because they remember what it feels like to be in that same position.
So you're very open to the idea of learning off each other, working off each other. What about communication? Is there a certain specific style that works best for you, or are you constantly maybe overcoming different barriers in terms of communication?
I find that really depends on who you're talking to, right? If I'm speaking with design stakeholders versus business stakeholders or development stakeholders, it completely changes the context of how you communicate what it is you need to be sharing with them, because you need to make it relatable to them. It's not about you. It's not about you communicating the information. It's how do you help them understand what the core pieces, what are the most important pieces to this person or this individual. I'm running into that right now, actually, with communicating the magnitude of a new product. Like, why would we take like a component-based approach as opposed to a page-by-page approach when you're building out a product? What's the purpose of that? Why would you do that? And that varies from business to design to engineering, right? Like, what is important to those 3 different personality types is all going to be different.
Great. All right, so I'm just conscious of the time. We've got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to move on to burning questions. So, ready for it?
Hot damn.
Flame emoji.
What excites you most about the future of development?
I think it's getting to a place where it's no longer just like the nerds club. It's getting like web dev is kind of sexy now. It's like, oh, hot damn, like you do web dev too. That's cool. And like everyone does web dev, and so many more people are just like getting more and more excited by this idea because it's just another creative outlet. It's not like this coding thing. It's like, hey, we're building stuff for the world, and it's becoming more and more approachable. It's getting more like less stigmatized now as like the nerds club, and it's becoming super, super accessible to all sorts of people.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm super excited that the web is growing. CSS is getting huge. Like a couple of years ago, we had Flexbox, and everyone who did CSS for like 5 years was like, whoa, CSS is getting hard. And then we got animations, and now we have grid coming, and then we have JavaScript, and then but you have React, and then you've also got these different frameworks for animation. And it's just growing and growing and growing. And a lot of people get very anxious about that because they say, how do I learn it all? But I think what the future is going to be is specialization. I think that regardless of if you've been in this industry for 6 months or 6 years, just pick the one thing that you just love, like that is your favorite thing to work with, that you go home at night and you do a code pen, pick that and specialize in that, because it's getting so huge that there's no way you're going to be just a jack of all trades, and you're going to move ahead in this industry much quicker if you just specialize on that one piece of tech.
I've only been doing this for a couple of years, so I'm still learning really what's possible and where this can go. And so that, to me, like that unlimited, like it's literally unlimited potential, and having that optimistic viewpoint is so cool because you can create anything from nothing. That's probably what I'm really excited about.
That's awesome. And lastly, what is the best piece of professional advice that you've ever been given?
You will learn more from your peers than you will from a blog post, a tutorial. No offense, Wes. The biggest growth periods that I ever had over the last couple of years have been when I've worked on really hard projects with really fucking smart people. And like literally feeling like I was drowning every single day when I was at code, and going home and like feeling like I was dying. The other thing was, if you can't do the shitty job awesome, how are you supposed to do the great jobs awesome?
That's great.
One common saying in like non-dev industries is that those who can't teach, and that's like very much the opposite in our industry.
Yeah.
If you want to get good at something, volunteer somewhere to mentor, try and see if you can teach someone, even if it's like the interns and juniors at your company. Explaining those same concepts again, like even something basic as like floats in CSS to someone who doesn't even understand what layouts are, will make you understand that concept so much more than you ever did before. Teaching is extremely, extremely valuable, even if it's to one other person, your neighbor, whatever it is. And I highly recommend you do more of that.
Great.
Yeah, I don't even have an answer. That's like my answer right there. Just seriously, that's where I am today. I started a crappy little WordPress blog when I first started, and I put up a couple little blog posts, and then I tried something with JavaScript, and then before you know it, you're getting invited to speak at things, and it's crazy how fast things will move if you just keep on doing it and keep on sharing what you're knowing. If you're not sharing things, if you're not putting it out there, putting it up on GitHub or writing a blog post or writing a code pen, you're not progressing your skills, and people aren't going to be paying attention to you, and you might not move as fast as you want ahead in your career.
So a lot of community-based learning off each other's and having that open perception.
Yeah, share everything you know.
I've done a course, or I've learned a new language almost every single year since I started the front-end development bootcamp. And that's been over the last 3 years. Now I'm doing the full stack course, which is crazy. But
That's awesome. Okay, so let's open it up to the floor for any questions for our panelists. Anyone?
all right, we're done. Let's go.
Okay,
there.
yes.
So talk a little bit about Twitter and things like that. So I'm curious on how important you feel your social media presence is for your career path, and also just like, especially for Wes, so big on Twitter, like how you manage your social media presence when you have all this other stuff to do. When we kind of talked about going back and forth between all these different tasks can be kind of detrimental. So just how you manage all of that.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, yeah. So the question was about like Twitter and social media. How important is being involved in something like that to your career? I've seen lots of developers who tweeted 3 times and they're fine in their career. At the end of the day, it's how good you are as a developer, which is going to get you the job. However, I found that I learn a lot on Twitter. I find that I have some really good relationships. I'm able to ask questions of the right people almost immediately. So for me, and especially it's like someone like me who's selling courses and needs to be visible, it's like very, very important. And even when I first started on Twitter like 10 years ago, I got all of my first freelance jobs from Twitter. It was like there was like 40 people in Toronto that used Twitter, and I met like Satish and Vern, who are now Shopify, and they brought me a lot of work. And it's crazy just to see. If I didn't have Twitter, I don't think I would have met any of the community that I have today.
Yeah, it very much depends on the kind of role that you want to establish for yourself. I know a lot of developers who are just subject matter experts. They keep to themselves and are absolutely incredible at what they do. They don't even have Twitter. They don't have any social outlet, and they do just fine. But if you're building stuff that needs a lot of community involvement, if you're teaching, if you're selling something, then if you're freelancing, if you have an agency, then that requires a very different kind of presence. So it very much depends on what kind of role you want to play in the industry.
It's about being top of mind too when you want to have that constant social media presence. I used Twitter instead of sending emails when I was first trying to get into the industry, because I found that people they would be more receptive to me sending them an email. Sending them a Twitter, 140 characters, or sending them an in-mail LinkedIn message. I thought they were more receptive to that than they were to any cold email that I would ever send them. People are getting thousands of emails already. You send them a quick tweet, they'll totally reply.
Yeah.
100%. Twitter for me removed the barrier of entry to trying to get into the industry when I didn't know anybody when I moved to Toronto. So I'm originally from Alberta, and I moved to Toronto 3 years ago, and I paid for a LinkedIn subscription because I could send in-mail requests to people that I didn't know, asking them about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the companies that they were working for, because I wanted to know what it was like on the inside, what was it actually like on the inside. Because companies can look really shiny and amazing, but maybe it's shit. Maybe I won't like working there. Maybe it's just not a good fit for me. How do I find that out?
Yeah.
You ask people.
I think also, if you think that at one point you may want to get a better job, you may want to launch a product, you may want to be really involved in this community, maybe do some speaking, start now. Because what I see is a lot of people are like, it's like the person who gets fired from their job and then they start a LinkedIn account or something like that. Obviously LinkedIn is the worst, but you get the point, right? Nice. Don't just start it when you need it, because it's not going to be there for you. So if you have any desire of interacting with people, maybe you want to get a job at Facebook or something like that, you need to be on these people's radars now, so that in 2 years from now, when you say, hey, I'm looking for a job, they're going to vouch for you. Why? Because they've been interacting with you every day for a couple of years.
I find a lot of those interactions, a lot of the opportunities that I'm getting now came from when I was hustling, when I moved here. And I was literally having 4 to 5 meetings a day with people that I didn't even know, just a coffee meeting for 30 minutes. And that came back around 6 months later, 12 months later, and it's still coming back around from the initial move that I had made. And a lot of VCs will talk about this, or a lot of founders when they're looking to raise seed rounds. Really fast seed rounds go when you already have your network that's available and ready to give you money. It doesn't come when you start looking for money, because you don't have those people that are available. It's way easier to open up the door when you already know this individual. You're like, hey, I've launched this product. Do you want to be a part of my seed round? You'll see people that close seed rounds in 4 weeks. And it looks like it was just magic. But they didn't talk about those 5 years that they were using to hustle and network with people in the industry.
Absolutely. Cool.
Any other questions?
There's a billion new things every day, right?
Yeah.
What one thing for each of you, be it a tool, a library, a language, whatever, is on your radar that you're really excited about?
I'm working on ES6 and React via Wes Boss's courses. But that's actually what I'm working on.
I paid for this panel, by the way.
That's
just a
business
big
acumen.
ad. I don't know. There's so much cool stuff. I'm really excited about GraphQL right now, which is going to, if you've ever had to do 6 REST requests just to get the data that you need on the page, GraphQL is going to let you do one, and you can give me 3 customers, but also fill in their purchases and their dog's name, and then it'll bring it back to you in one bundle. So it's going to be a while, because that requires buy-in from the server side and on the client side, but I'm super stoked about it.
Yeah, I sort of have always 2 sides of me, where one is very development focused, and that's very much React, Redux, and actually GraphQL these days, which is super fun. And the other side, I'm very much excited still in pushing my UX skills further, and learning more about the weird intricacies that show up when it comes to not web, not browser stuff, the interactions on mobile devices, interactions on wearables, interactions on touchscreen media, and how that affects the work that we do every day.
Question here, yeah.
Just as a dev who teaches in the evenings as well, I'm interested to hear a little more on how you find that teaching has impacted your non-teaching life, and how you reconcile kind of having two work lives, because it's not.
That's a great question.
not easy.
I think like it's very tiring. It's definitely very tiring and takes a lot out of me when I'm teaching, and I take like big chunks off after I'm done teaching a session to make sure that I'm not like, yes, I love doing it, but I also want to do a good job every time I do it. So I make sure I take a break in between doing teaching sessions. The one thing that it's really helped me do is talk to people better. It sounds weird, but like the words that you use, the words that you choose to say are so much more important than you think they are. The way like choosing to use one word versus another completely changes the meaning of that sentence, or the way someone chooses to take that sentence. So it's really weird, but I've learned to be more kind than I thought I was, which is extremely, extremely important, and not just in a teaching environment, in just a normal human environment.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I don't know. Like teaching is my job, so I don't really have two things to reconcile. But yeah, teaching just makes me understand the concept so clear. When I first started in 2011 teaching, like I kind of knew floats pretty good, but like I can tell you anything about floats, CSS floats right now, and it's just like so solidified in my mind because I've taught it so many times.
You'll probably explain it like 7 different times to like the learning styles as well.
Yeah. You also learn to gauge people's learning styles, where like you don't talk to someone like they're an idiot if they know some stuff, or if it's someone who is a little bit more new to it, or they learn a different way, they like different explanations. So yeah, just gauging personality types is something I've really picked up.
Great. Then we've got time for one more quick question. Anyone?
Make it a good one.
Okay, great.
I was going to talk a little bit. Sorry. So these guys, they both teach in the evenings. What about the people that have a day job and also do a lot of freelance work in the evenings, right? Like, I'm at a point now where I shut off my computer at 7:30 p.m. because otherwise I'll be up till 3 and then I'm fucked for 2 days. Like, I feel drunk when I get up in the morning if I do that. So I'm really, really disciplined about it. But before, when I was working the day job, the 9 to 5, like I was coding on the train when I was commuting in, and I was coding on the way back, and like trying to manage client meetings and stuff like that with your freelance work in addition to your day job. Like it's just challenging. It depends on what it is that you want. I go in like ebbs and flows of months where I'll be in super crunch mode, super learning mode, and then it'll be like a little bit more of a break, and I'll focus on like exercising and health and like going and hanging out with my family and my friends and that kind of thing. But it definitely it like is constantly changing.
Great. Awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out, and especially for our panelists as well. Thank you, and FITC, for this awesome event, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.